Hey guys, welcome to Platitude U.S. History. This is the last in the series about the causes of the Civil War. And this one's about states' rights. Oh my god, I just hit my shin against the table. I'm so sorry. Okay, I'm back. Alright, so states' rights will often be argued, especially in the South, that the reason for the Civil War had nothing to do with slavery. It was all about the interference of the government, of the federal government, that it was actually a battle of states' rights and whether or not the states had power in regards to their interactions with the federal government. And according to Southern states, the lead up to the Civil War, they will argue that they did not have any power in the federal government. And states' rights really will grow out of sectionalism. Here's a problem with the argument that it was states' rights and not slavery. They were mad because the federal government was telling them not to have slaves. So they wanted to employ their states' rights so they could have slaves. Okay? Let's be clear about that. Makes me crazy. Okay? But anyway, this issue of states' rights, the South really, they start advocating for the idea of states' rights, and it starts with the Fire Eaters, it starts with John C. Calhoun, it starts with, actually no it doesn't, right? It starts with Thomas Jefferson and James Madison way back when, Kentucky and Virginia resolutions, and the ideas of nullification of federal laws, and the social compact theory, that the federal government received power from the states because the states were willing to give them that power, and if the federal government oversteps, then the states have the right to nullify any federal laws. And so a lot of the Southern argument around this idea of states' rights comes from that idea of the social compact theory and nullification. But at this point, in the lead up to, in the 1850s especially, the South really saw the government as the enemy. The federal government was the enemy, and they wanted to limit the government's interference in daily life. They wanted to limit what the government could tell them they could or could not do in their home, or with their slaves, or with their families, or with their communities. And they really hated it. They found it hypocritical, and they found it two-faced, I guess, for them to say that they were just providing a helping hand to the individual in need when they were interfering. And they really found these government mandates oppressive, and they found it to be a form of meddling in their family and personal lives. So oftentimes, especially when they started talking about this idea of states' rights, they likened themselves to patriots, to the patriots under British rule, under the British monarchy. And that's really how they saw it. They saw that the North was trying to lord over them and treat them like a colony as opposed to a part of the Union. So they were trying to throw off that tyranny. And the best way that they felt they could do that was they started with the idea of nullification and the idea of not adhering to federal laws that they felt were too tyrannical. And they based this power really on the significant amendment, the 10th Amendment, which talks about states' rights, and it talks about how if it wasn't explicitly stated in the Constitution, that right is reserved for the states. And they were like, you can't, it never talks about slavery per se. Never does it actually use the word slavery in the Constitution. There is a 3/5 compromise. And it uses all these euphemisms. And so it creates these loopholes, right? And so because if you're a strict constructionist of the Constitution, because it doesn't say that slavery is bad or slavery even exists, right? The Southern states will argue that the 10th Amendment gives them the right to dictate whether or not slavery exists in their state or not. Obviously, the North is not going to agree with this. They will be much more loose constructionists in this case. So they'll nullify the idea of nullification, basically. And then we have probably what's going to end up happening is that all of these things are going to come together, and it leads to this divide in the Democratic Party, and you have these Northern Democrats and Southern Democrats, and it's really going to, this political fight is really going to come to fruition when you're talking about the up-and-coming Republican Party, and specifically in the state of Illinois, where you have this newcomer, this guy from nowhere, from obscurity. His name is Abraham Lincoln, and he's a Republican, and nobody knows who he is. And he's just this tall, gaunt, quiet guy, versus Stephen Douglas, who is a well-seasoned politician. He's a Democrat. He's a Northern Democrat. And basically, Stephen Douglas, they're debating for the Senate position for the state of Illinois. And they're competing against each other. They are candidates that are running against each other for the Senate seat. And Stephen Douglas and Lincoln, they have these ongoing debates. And they're talking about all of the issues: sectionalism, states' rights, manifest destiny, everything. And ultimately, a question is asked about slavery. And Lincoln has said from the get-go, he is anti-slavery. Not necessarily an abolitionist. He doesn't want to go that far, that extreme, but he is anti-slavery. Douglas, however, makes the political mistake, in the Southern Democrats' opinion, when he states that these new territories should be given the opportunity for popular sovereignty. The South does not like popular sovereignty because they are afraid that slavery will not be able to expand under the idea of popular sovereignty, which, by the way, should really be indicative on whether or not, it's a good idea. If the populace isn't going to vote for it, something's wrong, right? I mean, I'm just going to put that out there. I don't know. But anyway, so when Stephen Douglas says this, the people in Illinois are like, yay! And they vote for Stephen Douglas, and he becomes senator of Illinois. But it brings Abraham Lincoln, to the forefront, to the stage, the political stage, the national political stage. And the Republican Party, he becomes the nominee for the presidential election of 1860 for the Republican Party. And he gets elected president. Dun dun dun! If you're a Southerner. Alright, so that's it. Now we're going to start in on the Civil War. Catch you cats later.